All right, we're back at it. I asked you last class to think about why a false memory expert like Elizabeth Loftus could be endangered. I'm curious what you all came up with, but I'll go ahead and spill the beans. So sometimes memories are repressed. We all know that. And so psychologists will sometimes work with clients to help them recover repressed memories. But Loftus was finding that sometimes the processes that we were using to try to recover repressed memories were actually implanting false memories in the client. In other words, we may have made somebody remember being abused by their father, for example, when that actually never happened. And so when an expert like Loftus comes in to challenge testimony on such a sensitive and serious issue, and to be frank, I mean, we do recover repressed memories sometimes, but again, the process can be fraught. And so Loftus could be hated for saying, no, you actually weren't abused or something like that. And as you can imagine, these are really tough, really difficult issues. Today we talk about another tough issue, and that's false confessions. If there's a confession, there's typically not even going to be a trial, right? So if there is a confession and there is a trial, though, jurors are going to look at that confession and say, hey, look, they already said that they did it. There's nothing else to talk about here, right? So like eyewitness testimony, confession evidence is taken very, very seriously in a court of law if it ever even goes to trial. Do you really even think about why somebody might confess to something they didn't commit? Well, I don't know. You all are creative. You can probably come up with some reasons why somebody might say they did something that they didn't do. But a part of the picture that people are typically unaware of is what happens during police interrogation. Now, disclaimer, you will never be interrogated by the police, right? Why? Don't say because you're going to be good or you're always going to be at the right place at the right time, right? Some things aren't within our control because you'll ask for your lawyer. Again, I'm not your lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice. This is not an attorney-client conversation, but you'll ask for a lawyer so that this will stop immediately. Even your right to remain silent can be used against you. I think it was 2013, but don't quote me on that, Texas versus Salidas, where somebody was answering questions and then they got silent with the police, and the police used that silence to incriminate them. So don't even just be silent. Don't even say, I'm going to be silent. The magic words are, I want my attorney. But if one doesn't utter those magic words, police interrogation can be a little bit crazy. So the first step is direct confrontation. You did it. We know you did it. We have the evidence to put you away. This is just a formality. We've already got you. Step number 2 is themes. So we're looking for some sort of face-saving justification for the commission of the crime. In other words, they're trying to give the person who committed the crime a way to feel better about it. Yeah, you did it, but it wasn't about you. This was about your kids, right? This was about, being a good dad to your family. Or, well, this was just about sticking it to the man. Or, look, you're not a bad person. This wasn't a big deal. This was just kind of a funny prank. Or I don't know, some sort of face-saving justification. It's a fishing expedition to see what that might be. Number 3 is interrupting objections or denials. So trying to stop that cognitive step. We know that we build momentum once we walk down a path. So the interrogating officer is going to try to stop the person from even being able to utter words like, I didn't do it. Because once we cognitively commit, we're less likely to go back on it. If they are able to object, then number 4 is overcoming objections. No, challenge that. No, that doesn't work because we have this, we have that evidence. A piece of this equation is false evidence ploys. So a false evidence ploy is either the fabrication, creation, or illusion to evidence that doesn't actually exist. Oh, we have you on camera doing it. Oh, your buddy in the next room is telling us that you did this, 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 and this. 5 people saw you do it. It's whatever the case may be. Police are allowed to lie to you. So anytime they do so, that's a false evidence ploy. And we know that false evidence ploys dramatically increase the likelihood of false confessions. Number 5, keeping the suspect's attention because they may be inclined to shut down. Similarly, number 6, handling a passive mood. You don't want them to go into passive mood if you're going to need a confession, so you've got to find a trigger to get them engaged, to get them talking. Number 7 is alternative question. So at this point, going back to themes, what the interrogating officer will typically do is ask an alternative question, both clauses leading to guilt. So did you commit the crime because, you're just an asshole, or did you commit the crime because you wanted to be a good dad? And obviously there's no winning answer here. Either way you're committing, but they're trying to give you an easier way to confess to the crime. Step 8 is oral confession. We go there before the written confession because, again, foot in the door, if you've said aloud that you've done it, you're probably not going to back down. But if we go straight to the written confession, which is a detailed formatted narrative from start to finish of everything you did, you might be like, whoa, I don't want to sign that. But if you've already given an oral confession, you're much more likely to sign the written confession. So those are the 9 steps to police interrogation and what is done to try to get a confession. I just want to point out that we need to give everybody the benefit of the doubt here. It's not that police officers are out there looking for a false confession. They're not trying to get somebody to confess to something they didn't commit. That might happen in incredibly rare cases, right? But I think the vast majority of the time, we're just really motivated to get confessions because in many cases, it's a confession or an acquittal. So we don't really live in CSI, right? We don't always have the magical evidence that can scientifically prove something. So oftentimes it's word against word. And if somebody doesn't confess, that might be the end of it. And these might be really serious cases. So there's a lot of motivation to get confessions. We're pretty good at getting confessions. But one unfortunate byproduct of that is that sometimes we get confessions that are false. Yeah. So I included an article about false confessions and some of the different types of false confessions. So take a look at that. It'll show you some of the different reasons that people do confess to crimes they don't commit. But now that you know a little bit more about police interrogation and how long this can go on, right? Because hours and hours and hours, sometimes it's hours before the police officer even enters the room and this begins. So I think a lot of us don't really have any understanding of what this can look like. Oh, one other random thing I should share is that oftentimes police will use lie detector tests even though they're not admissible in court. So you all are psychologists, you can see the rationale here, right? If we can trick somebody into thinking that we have a test that's actually scientifically viable, which they really aren't, saying that they're guilty, then again, much more likely to confess. There's a lot of psychology that goes into all of this. Again, you won't be in this situation because you will request your lawyer. The same as when, a police officer asks you a question like, do you mind if I search in your trunk? You do mind because you have a Fourth Amendment protection against unconstitutional search and seizure, and you'd like to exercise that right. Again, not your lawyer, not giving you legal advice, but this stuff can get murky, so make smart, safe choices, and don't ever find yourself in this position without a lawyer, because many of us overestimate, again, think restraint bias. Many of us think, well, I would never confess even under those circumstances. Don't assume you know what you would do under those circumstances of extreme stress. So check out that article, let me know what you think, and let's chat more about all these crazy ways that psychology and the law don't necessarily play nicely. And I'll see you next time.